Hi, everybody. We're going to try something a little bit different we haven't tried here before. And specifically tonight, we're going to talk about the Atomos Shogun with the GH4. Now, there have been a lot of people that have talked about the Shogun with the Sony A7S. I don't shoot a Sony A7S, but GH4 here, and just wanted to kind of talk about some of the considerations with that combination. This is the first time I've done a Hangouts on air. We tried to do one earlier today with my new friend Alex Jordan, who does has a colorist training program, and we're going to do just a little interview with him. But we had some problems getting him connected, so I am going to do this first one here. If you happen to tune in and you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. Let's see this feature. We're going to turn on the Q&A here. I'm going to figure out how to do that. So, in any case, if you do tune in, I hope you find this helpful. So let's go ahead and get started. And then in the future, we're obviously going to actually advertise these ahead of time. So if you do happen to have the time to attend and you've got some questions, you can do that. So here we're just trying to get used to how this whole thing works. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now I've had the Shogun since about December, late December 2014. It's now March. And I guess let me just kind of cut to the chase here. If you are expecting the Shogun to take your Panasonic GH4 footage, even when you're sending the signal out 422 10-bit to the Shogun, you're not really going to see a huge difference in terms of the footage that it captures. So if you were expecting that, I would strongly encourage you to kind of curb your expectations there. I don't think that's where this combination really, really shines. But do I have regrets buying it? I paid for this with my own money. It is a $2,000 device, so it's more expensive than the camera. But there are some benefits it provides. However, I don't think that one of those benefits is that you're going to have much more amazing footage. It just really doesn't seem to make a difference. Now, I don't think that's so much a criticism of the Shogun. I think what that really speaks to is that the the codec in the Panasonic GH4 is really, really quite good. So I think it speaks more to that. So in any case, that's just one thing to keep in mind. Um, there are some downsides really to the Shogun, and we'll get into those in just a few minutes. But let me just kind of talk about a few other things here. So again, one of the big advantages here that I think people saw was with the Shogun, you can capture 422 10-bit footage. That means you're getting a lot more color information than you're typically going to record in most non-professional cameras. And Panasonic GH4 and the Sony A7F both fall into that category. They're really, I would say, kind of enthusiast, kind of higher end consumer cameras, but definitely still consumer cameras. They can be used for professional jobs, but in terms of the amount of color information they record, I think they definitely, because of that, fall into more of a consumer realm. So, eh, um, so that's one thing to keep in mind. In those cameras, they're recording 420 8-bit footage, and then in the case of the Panasonic GH4, you can actually send higher um, higher bit rate. No, not higher bit rate. Excuse me. More color depth information. That's the 10-bit, and then also less color or chroma subsampling. So 422 color. That's what those refer to. In short, I don't see a big difference to my eye. I don't even see a difference when I start doing heavy color grading. I don't see much of a difference even when doing chroma key, which is where you would normally expect to see differences there. And we'll show you some footage here in just a little bit. But again, I'm not seeing a huge difference there. So really the question becomes, well, why would you even bother with this if you're shooting a Panasonic GH4? Well, let me tell you about some of the positive things, and we'll walk through them. First of all, I think that the screen is absolutely stunning. It is beautiful, and it makes it a lot easier to shoot just because you have a much larger screen. So we're talking here a 7-inch screen. It is a beautiful screen. It can be calibrated, which is really kind of an amazing thing. I pre-ordered mine, and for those that pre-ordered, they got the calibration tool from Atomos, and that is a super, I think, a really a pretty amazing thing. So you can get pretty accurate color when you're shooting out in the field or in the studio, and it's nice to have a monitor that has some amount of color accuracy. So it's not perfect. It's still an 8-bit monitor. Or the panel itself is 8-bit. The recorder again is 10-bit, but the panel itself is 8-bit. So you're still going to get some banding and things of that nature. But it is nice to at least know that you're in the ballpark as far as color accuracy is concerned. Um, The screen surface here is a Gorilla Glass type of material, so that's nice. That works well, and I'm happy with that, definitely. It seems that's durable enough. The just like any other screen though, outdoors, this one's tough to see. It's a little bit better than some I've used, but it's not, it's a very reflective surface, this glass here, and it can be pretty rough to work with outdoors. So I think really if you're going to be working with it extensively outdoors, you're going to need to consider some sort of hood. And Atomos just, I don't know if it's actually shipping yet, but they did announce a hood for this specifically for this model, and I'll need to be saving up and adding that to the kit here. Otherwise, it's just really difficult to use outside. There is a little bit of backlight bleed. You can't really see it when you're shooting. I don't really feel like it. It doesn't seem to me like it really affects the overall experience or messes with your judgment and your ability to really kind of capture what you're trying to capture. So just in the spirit of full disclosure, it's not a perfect panel, but it is a pretty good one, and it really is beautiful. The thing that's so nice about it is that for focus, it makes focusing so much easier. Now, of course, in the Panasonic GH4, you have built-in focus peaking, and that's super helpful. But having this 7-inch screen, you don't have to zoom in to tell whether or not you're in focus generally, which is super nice. And it's just so high resolution that it works really well. Again, in terms of specs, it is a 1920 by 1200 screen, so you get a full HD view of your footage, plus you get the controls at the bottom. And again, nice setup there. Storage, the Shogun is a little bit particular about which SSDs you use with it. So in my case, when I first got it, I had sitting around an older, it's actually not even that old. It is a um, OCZ Technology Vertex 4. It actually, this drive it turns out to be interesting. I'd gotten really good reviews when I first bought this probably 2 years ago, but this does not work. It's not on Atomos's approved drive list, and it did not work with the Shogun. So it is pretty particular. If you do decide to go with the Shogun, I would be very careful and make sure that you get one of the drives that Atomos lists on their site as being compatible with the Shogun. I also used a drive that I had used with my Ninja 2 in the past for HD footage, just as a test, and it didn't work either, even if I was just trying to capture HD footage. So the requirements for the Shogun are pretty stringent as far as which SSDs actually work with it and which drives work with it. So make sure you check that. Be prepared to invest in those drives as well. So it's not just the $2,000 price tag. So far, from my perspective, you're going to have to invest for drives, and you're going to have to invest for a hood of some sort if you're going to be operating with it outdoors. Now, build quality. This is where it's gotten, I think, some bumps and bruises in terms of the other reviews that have come out already. This is not the most amazing build quality. And I seem to remember when they first announced it that the talk was that the case was going to be just like all of the other Atomos recorders, that the case would be aluminum, and I think that was their original intention. However, this is in fact plastic. I don't know if you can see this here, but up on top here, the way the design has worked on the previous recorders from Atomos is that the cases are aluminum, and the case actually acts as a heat sink. Well, I think what they found with the Shogun is that doing 4K requires a processor that generates a lot of heat. And so they've actually got this heat pipe design, just like you see on a lot of like PC builds. You have these heat pipes to help dissipate heat a lot faster. So this is kind of, it is plastic. It's some people have said it's really cheap plastic. I don't know if I'd call it really cheap plastic, but I would say that if you drop this thing, there's a pretty good chance that something's going to break. And that's another reason to get the hood, is that it provides some protection in case that does happen. Now, I have shot with my my Ninja 2 for a little over a year. Yeah, almost a year and a half now. And even though I'm very careful with my gear, I've dropped it a couple of times. So those drops happen, even when you're careful. So I think that makes the hood an even more important purchase to go along with this. In the case of my Ninja, again, I dropped it twice. In both cases, I had the hood on it and didn't sustain any damage, thankfully. So those hoods really provide a fair bit of protection as well. Let's see here. Another thing that does come with a case, and the case is like a Pelican case, and it's quite impressive. In fact, let me go grab that here. There we are. going to be hard to see that, but it is a tough case, and this makes me feel better about the whole thing in terms of the build quality of the Shogun. When you're transporting it, you got a very solid case that is the same quality grade as or quality as a Pelican case, so that inspires a little bit more confidence. One of the things that's kind of funny, some people have talked about this. It does say Shogun up here. Actually, mine says Hogun now. When I cleaned the screen for the first time, I used a sort of a chamois type cloth that's made for cleaning electronic screens, and took the S right off. So whatever that means, I don't know. Some people get freaked out about that kind of stuff. I think it was just kind of a silly oversight, and it doesn't really affect the performance of the unit, of course. Firmware is kind of a moving target, and I think Atomos has done a really nice job on this. When they first released it, it was kind of like kind of iffy because it didn't even do playback at the time. They've since added playback, so it works beautifully on that front. There are some things that are that have not been addressed yet. So DNX HD and DNX HR codecs, which are Avid codecs, which are great for recording and editing, have not yet been added. And unless that's happened in the last couple of days, but I don't think it has yet. Cinema DNG recording is not available. Again, for higher end cameras, that's not going to be for the Panasonic, but for others. And also, they have not implemented the 3D LUTs yet. So there's still some outstanding things that they have promised. I have found Atomos to be very good about adding features and releasing firmware on a fairly frequent basis. They're running behind right now, and I think they're really feeling under the gun because they're running behind on some things, but they never have failed to deliver in the past, and I'm hopeful that they'll be able to do that here in the future. In use, the things that I really love about this, you have, let's just turn this guy on here. And I don't know how well you can see that. It'll be a little bit difficult to see, but turn the screen a little bit this way. You do have these waveforms, and the waveforms are awesome to work with. You can, lay them over the entire screen like that. You can put them down in the corner here if you prefer. It's super nice to have waveforms to work with. You also have RGB Parade. Let me just make that bigger so we can see for our purposes here. We also have a vector scope. Again, super nice to have a vector scope and be able to really kind of dial in your color. And then you can also zoom in on the vector scope. So lots of, those are super helpful. You can also kind of tweak the transparency. So if you want to make them a little bit more transparent or make them more opaque, you can do that. That's kind of a nice thing. And also you can work on the brightness as well. So those are all very helpful to have, and really kind of, this is where I think the value of the Shogun with the Panasonic GH4 comes in, is you have tools like that you don't have built into the camera itself. You also do have focus peaking. The focus peaking, I think, needs a little work, to be honest, if we're being honest here. Switch over here to manual focus. You can see there now it's turned all this red. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, you can kind of see it switch from blue. And then as I get it focused, boom, there it goes red. So it's not as effective, I think, as the focus peaking built into the GH4 yet. But again, I think Atomos has received that message. I saw a talk from Jeremy Young, the CEO, and I think they realized that, okay, there may be some fine tuning we need to do there. And you don't have the ability to tell it to be a little bit more bold on the focus peaking. You do have some, some different options. You can go to black and white mode, which makes the peaking easier to see. And a couple of other modes. You also have zebras that you can turn on. And let me go back to regular mode here, turn that focus peaking off. And zebras here. Let me just see if we can get some zebras going. Yeah, no, interesting. Do I have the zebras on? Oh yeah, here they are. They're off to the side. You can't see them, but yeah, there's some zebras going on here. Hard to see on probably what you're seeing there, but you do have those options, and those are nice. Again, you've got those on the Panasonic GH4, so I don't know how much value that adds right there necessarily, but it is nice to have those features as well. All right, let's drop the ISO back down so we can actually see it. What else do you have? False color. Again, I've talked about this in the past. False color is really nice because what you get over here is you get kind of what represents the kind of the dynamic range of your overall image here, and then it has mapped over that sort of a heat map type of thing, so you know what is exposed most brightly. That's going to be the pillar here, and this thing over here. And you can see that what's gray here is actually falling sort of into the mid-tones here. So it's really helpful to help identify the individual elements of your overall image and what's going to be captured at which luminance level. So really like that feature. And that's one thing that the Panasonic GH4 does not have. All right, so there's a quick overview. Oh yeah, the zooming in, you can zoom in on your image here, which is super nice. And this is a 2:1 zoom right here. We can go back to a 1:1. You can see you can kind of zoom around here, or we can turn that off and just go back to regular. So that's a pretty nice thing. One thing I would say as feedback to Atomos, it would be nice if I didn't have to come into this menu and tap there to zoom in. It'd be nice if you could somehow not have to actually go into the menu to make that happen. So maybe there's something they can do on that in a future firmware. The touchscreen is great. It's as responsive as any smartphone I've ever used, so that works pretty nicely. The kind of the biggest thing that really I think makes it an advantage, this recorder versus just recording in the Panasonic GH4 is recording to high bitrate codecs. So um, we'll get back to that in just a minute in terms of editing, and I'll show you some things there. But it really does take a lot of processing power to do these high bitrate codecs. And this thing gets pretty warm. There's actually a fan inside, and you can hear it. It's not terribly loud. I've never had a problem with it affecting the overall audio capture, so during production. So I haven't really found that to be an issue, but it does have a little fan in there. I would actually be worried in terms of overall longevity. That's probably one of the things that'll fail first in this unit. Just something to consider. But they do have a decent warranty, and so I'm not terribly concerned about that, but we'll see how those things do over time. And again, it does get pretty hot, and it let's move on to power. That I think is probably one of, I would say, the Achilles heel of the Shogun as of right now, from my perspective. If you're planning on battery powering this, you're going to be shooting out in the field. This is where I think this unit really has some issues. Um, it comes with let's see, this one's actually a different one. It comes with a 2600 milliamp Sony NPF style battery, like these here. And that battery that it came with originally, that was in the first batch. It only lasted for me for about 30 to 45 minutes of shooting. That is not very good, obviously. But what they've done is they realized, okay, that's a little bit of an issue. They were originally telling people, up to 3 hours of shooting time. Well, they've actually, for the people that bought the first batch of Shoguns, they've actually sent out a battery that's twice the capacity of that original. So that'll give you up to maybe an hour to an hour and a half of shooting. But even that still can, depending on what you're doing, that may not be very much. And it's, whereas on the Ninja 2, you had two batteries and it automatically switched over, which is a really nice system. On this one, there's only one place to hook up a battery. So you've got to stop shooting to change your battery. And again, the battery life is somewhat limited. So again, if you're going to be shooting this out in the field, you're probably going to need to invest in additional batteries or some other type of battery solution. So some other things to keep in mind there. If you are in studio, it does come with an AC adapter. So that's pretty nice. You can just plug into power if you've got it available. For me, that's typically what I'm going to be doing. I'm shooting a lot of corporate videos. In those cases, I can usually just plug in and it's not a major issue there. But again, those batteries, even just say, for example, I was looking up on Amazon here, there's a Sony, these are called L-type batteries. Third-party makers of these, that I've had pretty good luck with is called Wasabi Power. And we'll put links for those down below. But they have an 8,500 milliamp version of a battery, which should last. That should get you closer to 3 hours of shooting time, and that runs about $45 US on Amazon at present. So that's definitely something to consider there. So another investment you have to make if you're going to shoot seriously with the Atomos Shogun. All right. Test shots. I'm going to show you a couple here in just a second here, but if you got a couple of codecs to choose with, I'm shooting with ProRes. If you're editing on a Mac, shooting with ProRes is super nice. And let me show you something here. I'm just going to come over and let's share our screen here. How do I do that? Again, first time with the First time with the Google Plus Hangouts online. What is Showcase? I don't think that's what we want. Screen share. Here we go. Okay. They didn't make this super easy. Let's just share the entire screen. Okay. Okay. Hopefully that's working there. So we're going to come into DaVinci Resolve. So I've got a couple things going here. So this is Panasonic GH4 footage. This was recorded in the camera. And then here's a similar clip that was recorded in the Shogun. Now, what I did purposely in this one, you can see if we come back here. This thing's in my way. Go away. Okay. I come here, you can see this. I purposely set the white balance incorrectly on the two shots. So I wanted to see if I started grading, how would it turn out? Well, this is a Panasonic GH4 shot. This is the same shot recorded to the Shogun. And then if we come into color here, I did some color correcting just to see how well they graded. And I'm not perfect at color, at color correction yet. I'm still working to kind of refine my process there. But what was interesting is they both seem to do reasonably well. But watch this, when I play back in DaVinci Resolve in particular, when I play back the GH4 footage versus the Shogun footage, we're going to watch up here. Oh, right here. My I do have a external Thunderbolt RAID array. You can see it's playing back at like 14 frames per second, 13, 14 frames per second. It was shot at 24, just for reference. So it's only playing back about half speed. Okay. If I come over to the ProRes footage that was recorded in the Shogun, we got a lot of things going on. Normally, that's going to play back for me at 24 frames per second. So I'm finding that for 4K footage I'm on an iMac 5K with the Core i7 processor, so the upgraded processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, Thunderbolt 2 external 4-drive RAID array. So we've kind of opened up the pipes as much as we can with this setup. But I am getting full playback on the ProRes footage, whereas with 4K GH4 footage in DaVinci Resolve in particular, if you just play it, it's fine. But in DaVinci Resolve, so when you're doing color grading and in some cases when you're doing any sort of editing, it may not play back at full frame rates. So that's just one thing to consider. Dave Dugdale did his review of the Shogun, and he found the inverse when he was running on a PC instead of a Mac. He actually found that the H.264 footage played back okay in editing. I think he was in Premiere Pro, but the ProRes footage was dropping frames. So it's kind of a trade-off, and I'm not sure I understand all of the ins and outs there, but that is something to consider. Let's look at some more footage here. Now, again, I didn't notice a huge difference. It felt like I was able to push both of these and get them pretty much where I needed them. In terms of this other footage here, let's look at another one of the timelines. I came over here. Let's turn the sound off. And here I have some Shogun footage. Let's see if we can make that full screen. I don't think it's going to let us do that with the Hangout. But I didn't really see, again, even after grading, I just didn't really see a lot of difference between the GH4 footage and the Shogun footage. Even when when you start zooming in and things like that, again, just not seeing a huge difference. Now, to be fair, I'm not someone that does really heavy grading typically. I'm mainly going to do color correction and maybe a little bit of saturation and kind of make the footage look its best, pretty close to natural. But even when I was doing the color correcting to accommodate the fact that I shot these in the wrong white balance, I'm just not seeing, even when you zoom in 1-to-1, I'm not seeing a big difference in the footage. And again, I think that really speaks to the quality of the codec within the GH4 versus any sort of downside on the Shogun. So just something to consider there. Let's see here. Where were we? Let's go ahead and hide this. Okay, we're going to come back into our Hangouts here. And we are going to stop sharing our screen. Okay, there we are back. Moving on. Again, I found the same thing with when I was doing chroma key. I didn't find a huge difference as long as you light your backdrop right and you light your subject right or your talent right. Not really seeing a huge difference. As far as audio, and that's again, some of the other people have found that same thing. I mean, Dave Dugdale, I remember, said a very similar thing there on his. So just something to keep in mind. Audio, the preamps are actually pretty decent on the Shogun. I really like the sound of them. They're not too bright. A lot of preamps tend to be a little bit on the brighter side these days. But this one is a little less bright. It kind of rolls off pretty nicely on the high frequency, and I really like the sound of them. The only problem is they do tend to be a little bit noisier. So normally, again, I'm recording with a Tascam DR60D Mark II, and I found these are actually cleaner by a couple of dB. And you can go ahead and check out our channel. We have a little comparison where we walk through that on those. So I probably won't be recording the audio directly into the Atomos in most circumstances. I'll use my Tascam, or you could, if you wanted to do that, you certainly could as well. And they seem to work pretty nicely. So overall, let me just kind of wrap up with kind of my impressions, and we'll go to Q&A if I can figure out how to enable Q&A here. There's a chat. I don't know. This is one of those areas I'm gonna need some help figuring out, but I don't know how to enable this Q&A thing here. Okay. Well, anyway, that's something we'll work on in the future. If you do have questions, go ahead and leave those down below in the, once the video goes up on YouTube. But my overall impressions, really, the monitor is beautiful. It's great to have the exposure tools. It's great to have the focus tools. It's nice to have a high resolution 7-inch monitor when you're shooting. Really nice to work with that. So I don't have any regrets in terms of buying it. $2,000 is kind of a steep price for most of us that are enthusiasts if you're not shooting professionally. So, I would have a tough time saying that the GH4 is a candidate for, everyone that owns a GH4, go out and buy a Shogun. Not really. I don't think that's really it. The ProRes workflow is really nice where I can get full, real-time playback even in DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve seems to kind of be the worst case scenario in terms of playback, where it seems really kind of heavy because it's doing all that kind of deep color processing. But in the ProRes, it plays back buttery smooth, whereas I don't get the same effect with the footage that's recorded directly in the GH4. Well, and some might ask, well, couldn't you just buy a less expensive monitor? And certainly the answer is you could. There are lots of great monitors out there that you could get that have a lot of the exposure tools, all those kind of nice things that, I don't know of any in a less than $2,000 range, and maybe there are some out there, I don't know, that have the ability to be calibrated. So that's a kind of a nice feature about the Shogun here. But again, it really depends on what you're doing, and it's a nice addition. And if you shoot with one, you'll probably like it. It's nice to be able to capture ProRes files so that you can color grade and edit in full playback without dropping any frames, but it's not, I don't know that's worth the $2,000 price range for most of us. Power is definitely a consideration. I'm finding that you've got to have a power plan if you're going to be shooting out in the field. You're going to need to buy some additional batteries. And Atomos is also selling, or has announced, I don't think it's actually shipping yet, but they have a power station or a power base or something, I don't remember what they call it, where you can actually hook up 2 batteries and it kind of fits underneath here. That's another $300. So anyway, that would be a nice addition, but I don't know if that's really, I don't know. You have to decide for yourself whether that's worth it or not. That's a built-in feature on the Ninja 2, which I really, really enjoyed and appreciate. Build quality, again, is a little bit iffy. I think you definitely need to consider getting the hood if you're going to have this, because if you don't, if it drops, I think you could find yourself in trouble and you could have a damaged unit pretty easily. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty nice device. Only you can decide if it's worth the $2,000 in the type of shooting that you do. So I hope that was helpful for you. Thanks for tuning in here. Thanks for those. It looks like we did have some people tuning in live. Thanks for doing that. I'm just really, again, this is a first kind of foray into the Hangouts online. In the future, I plan to kind of let you know ahead of time. So if you have available time and you want to come and join in and ask questions, we'll be able to do that. And I've got to figure out how to do the Q&A here. Where's the Q&A? Is it popping up? It still says that feature is disabled. So I've got to figure out how to make that work. But again, thanks for checking this out. If you have questions, leave those down below. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. We'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you guys soon.